What's going on YouTube? Brandon here, and it's been a long time since I've done a motorcycle video, but with the re-release of the SV650 by Suzuki, I figured I'd do a little overview of the SV650 as it pertains to it being a great beginner motorcycle. This was my first road motorcycle. I bought it about 5 years ago now, and I have over 100,000 miles on it. I've basically completely redone the bike over the years, so I figure I have at least a little bit of perspective in how it ages and how it performs as a beginner and an intermediate motorcycle. So what makes the SV650 a good motorcycle for a beginner? Well, number one is really it's cost. It's not an expensive motorcycle, especially on the used market. You can buy used ones. I bought this one for $2,000. So to buy a motorcycle that you can drive everywhere, on the freeway, on the, in the city, on the canyons, for $2,000, that's a pretty good deal. So that was really a big consideration for me, because when I bought the motorcycle, I was still in school. I was almost broke. So yeah, number one. Number two is the engine. The engine on this bike is really, really nice. It's smooth. It has a very linear power delivery. It comes in around 70 horsepower. But it's not snatchy or anything like that. You get kind of the same response no matter where you are in the rev range. So even though it might be intimidating at first because of the sound and the torque, you will quickly get used to that. And because it's a 645cc, it has a lot more longevity than, say, a Ninja 250 or a Rebel 250 or even, any of those type of bikes would. So the engine makes it a great motorcycle for a beginner. Another great thing about it is because it's been out for so long, there's a really high availability of parts for it. Whether that be aftermarket parts or used OEM parts or even crossover parts, because a lot of parts from Gixxers like 600 and 750s will fit on the SV650 with either no tweaking or a little bit of tweaking. Like, for example, this one, I'm using Gixxer front and rear wheels, I'm using a Gixxer full front end with the brakes, and I'm also using a Gixxer fuel pump. So, yeah, you got that going for you. So the engine is kind of the highlight, and the availability of parts is really nice. Also, another thing that's really nice for a beginner is the seating position. It's kind of almost I think in the old days they called it a universal Japanese motorcycle seating position, where it's much more upright, particularly the naked one if you have a handlebar. This one has clip-ons because this is the S model, but even it is very comfortable to ride for a long time. Another thing going for it that makes it beginner friendly is how kind of light it feels. It's really easy to kind of flick it around. You don't feel like you're having to fight with it. I think that has to do with its weight, of course, but then also because of the smaller engine and just the 2 cylinders, it has a little bit less rotational mass than, say, like a inline 4 would have. So it's really easy. It just wants to turn for you. Like, you don't have to do too much work to ride this motorcycle, which is really nice. Now, this bike isn't all fun and games. There are a couple issues with it, particularly stock. I'm not going to talk so much about my bike because my bike's heavily modded to this point. All that's left of the original bike is the fuel tank, the frame. That's it. I've even replaced the engine. So yeah, I can't really speak to its stock form now, but it was stock for a while, so The problems I had when it was stock, the number one thing was the suspension. You know, in order to get this bike as a deal, they have to cut corners somewhere, and that ended up being in the suspension department for the most part. The suspension on the stock SV650 is, in my opinion, way too soft. When you accelerate quickly, particularly out of a turn, it's going to want to run wide because the rear shock is going to get over compressed, and the front end will kind of feel a little light. And then the same thing with braking, like right here, you know, like coming down a slope and diving into a turn, especially under braking, the front end will over compress and it's going to make you want to run wide. So kind of the number one issue you need to get sorted on this bike, once you get it, if you plan to keep it for the long haul, is you need to work on the suspension a little bit. Now, how you want to work on that's up to you. You could do like what I did, do a full front end upgrade, or you can just go in and do some emulators, some cartridges, maybe just some valves and springs, whatever you want to do to make it stiffer in the front and rear. Once you've sorted the suspension, the next thing you should probably address would be the brakes. The brakes aren't great. They're okay. I solved my braking by getting a new master cylinder and brake lines, and then also, of course, upgrading the front end. They came with the Gixxer 750 front brakes, which was fantastic. The rear brake's fine. Another thing I didn't particularly like about my bike, which I changed, was the throttle. The SV650's throttle is, I think it's a 1.5 turn throttle. It's a really long distance to go from 0 to 100% throttle. There are various mods you can do. One of the more popular ones is taking like an R6 throttle tube and slotting it in. I ended up just getting a proper race throttle. I got the Cycle Pirates race throttle, and it has 3 different actuators in it, so you can go from like full turn, half turn, and quarter turn. So I think I have mine on either half or quarter right now. Let me see. It's about a quarter. So that helped a lot. The last significant thing I would say that really helped change this bike's characteristics, it's not a must, but it's nice, was I put in a slipper clutch, which just really smoothed out my riding, particularly when coming into the high-speed turns. Oh, and going back to the throttle as well, another thing that'll help, the stock SV650 tends to run lean, so getting a power commander will help increase your horsepower and kind of smooth out your power delivery even more. So, you know, between the new throttle, the power commander, and the slipper clutch, is just really, really smoothed out the ride. But all in all, you know, this bike is just great. The longevity is fantastic. I have over 100,000 miles on this bike. I had 60,000 on my first motor before I was stupid and lost track of the mileage, and I ended up running it almost dry on oil and damaging it. But, you know, coming back to the parts department, I was able to buy a 2009 SV650 engine with 800 miles on it for $500. And that's at, you know, 50, 60,000 miles now with no problem. So there you go. All in all, a great beginner motorcycle. It gives you a lot of customizability and ability to grow the bike to make it exactly what you want. Almost like an old Mustang, you know, you can buy it as a piece of crap, but it's running, and then just build it into your dream car over the years. That's what I did with this. So if that's what you're interested in a motorcycle, great. This is an awesome bike for you, and you won't be disappointed.